Welcome back to the AYOY podcast.
Yeah.
Now today we have DeJake,
What's up?
we have Wraith, myself Phoenix, and we have a guest for the first time on the AYOY podcast. Would you like to say your name, Mr. Guest?
I mean, not my real one, but
that
we're using for this is Whippa.
Yeah, very good. So welcome, Whippa. Welcome to the crew.
Gracias.
Welcome to the gang. And you'll be joining us for a very special episode today. It's going to be very interesting. It's going to be the part 2 on anarchism. How epic is that? Alrighty, Wraith, would you like to... I'm going to hand over to you, Wraith.
Yeah. I guess the question on everyone's mind is, what type of porn do you watch, Whipper? Or you like? What's your flavor?
Non-consensual.
Good question.
Preferably,
Yeah.
preferably, like, you know, like Bill Cosby, where you walk into a bar, it's all mysterious and everything.
Okay.
You glance at someone across the bar, they glance
How do you
back,
feel
you
about,
maintain
like,
contact, you got that
dolphins?
spiciness, and then it's the secret mission. You slip into their drink, right? You know, so
Hey.
there's a lot of tension.
Okay. Yeah,
Nothing
like, they
gets
don't
me off
remember.
like that.
They don't remember it. You have a good time.
Delphine stuff.
Oh,
Sorry.
God, yeah. Belle Delphine.
Wraith. It's actually Wraith. I downloaded a pirate.
I watched her
actually.
stroke
I
two
love
cocks,
it.
man. I mean, I don't know what you guys are looking at.
Yeah, very
I haven't seen that, at least not on our OnlyFans.
Alrighty,
No,
so,
Reddit's a wonderful place.
so Whipper,
It is.
the
Please.
question I have for you now is, so can you give us a little bit of an insight into what your own political standing is? Like, where do you stand in it all?
To be honest, in the grand scheme of things, I think there's a lot of misinformation that both sides, at least in their most extreme forms, are dumb as fuck. Don't really have much of a standing, I guess, and that goes for both the left and the right. If you pick a hill and you choose to die on that hill, despite being given evidence to the contrary, despite
You want to
all
stay
of
more
this.
rational and open-minded about
Exactly, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I don't really have a political sense. I'd say if I had to choose, I'm probably leaning more towards the right, personally.
Yeah.
Although that's not to say that I disagree with the left fundamentally.
Yeah.
Policies, right?
That makes
Should
sense.
take care of people that, you know, in our community aren't as well off. Now, you know, like, I think that's just sort of common sense.
Yeah.
But there's different ways of doing that. That's
very true.
to the right sort of, you
That's
know,
exactly it. Yeah,
start
yeah.
fighting about things. But yeah.
Yeah, fair. And in saying that, is there actually any parts of anarchism you agree with by chance?
Anarchy being the definition of like overthrowing the government and then trying to
Some of
create.
the ideals, not
Okay,
necessarily.
Let's
say libertarianism. Let's have the idea of restricting government, or maybe saying in any area having no government and letting private people take care of the things by consensual or local methods.
The libertarians would seek to maximize autonomy and political freedom, emphasizing free association, freedom of choice, individualism, and voluntary association.
Yeah.
Libertarians share a skepticism of authority and state power, but some of them diverge on the scope of their opposition to existing economic and political systems.
Yeah.
Is that the definition that we're running with?
That is a great definition,
Yep.
yes.
All right. Well, look, for me personally, I've always been more of an anti-authority figure. That's
Nice.
just me, who I am.
Well, maybe you are more libertarian than you realize.
Potentially,
I honestly
right?
feel like you are, yeah. You
But
think
here's
you would
the
be
problem.
libertarian if you looked into their party. Yeah.
No. Here's the issue, though.
Yeah, here's the
I
issue.
think that having a hierarchy, having someone in power, makes fucking sense on every single level, right?
Poor.
Provided, of course, that person has been voted for, right? Like, we're not talking about some fucking dictatorship
Okay, yeah.
shit here, right?
Uh-huh.
So, I think freedom of choice, fantastic, right? Emphasizing free association, like, can we define that a bit more? If it just means, like, I'd like to associate myself with this, then absolutely, go for your fucking life, right? Political freedom, absolutely. Believe whatever the fuck you want to believe, right?
Yeah. See, that's a libertarian view right there. Boom.
Yeah, but
Yeah, nice.
I still think you're wrong.
Yeah. Just fair enough. And
Right? Like, that's one thing, like, I see a lot of far left who just sort of shout down upon people with opposing views, and that's of course the extreme form. Right?
Yeah.
Like, well, I'm not going to say everyone on the left shouts that down at other people. There's a lot of very rational people.
Yeah,
right?
that's
But
very true.
what I see a lot of is people screaming down at other people with differing opinions until they can't actually form a well-structured argument.
Such as that, I agree.
But of course, that does happen with the right, and they go, "If you don't get off my fucking land, I'm gonna put a fucking 352 in your butt."
That sounds fair to me.
There's two extremes to every side, so I don't like to align myself with a side, but
yeah, that's fair enough.
I'd say that here's where I sort of diverge. Like, I think it's fantastic to be skeptical of authority, absolutely, and state power. You should absolutely hold people accountable. That being said, doing away with them is not the answer.
Yeah, that's where we have the difference for sure.
Right. I think everyone should do their research, fact check everything. This is why I'm pulling up, definitions as I go.
Good.
Because
go for it. You're welcome to Google.
I want to make sure that I don't misspeak or step out of line. I don't want my words to get twisted.
100%. Yeah.
I think be skeptical. Do your research. Do research as well on the opposite views, right? Don't just look at, things that align with you. Like, in preparation for this podcast, I saw someone talking about, where people went wrong, when thinking of anarcho-capitalism. I still disagree with him. That's absolutely fine.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah, that's fair.
You were watching a video on what they thought AMCAPs got wrong, or where they think AMCAPs go wrong.
Some common misconceptions about.
Oh, right. All right. Nice. Yeah. That's cool.
Who was it by? Let's see. Hold on. Let me see if I can pull this shit up. I don't know. Just continue.
Yeah. All right.
By Thought Monkey, I think. No.
Yeah. So, opposed to... What is it? Whippa. Yeah. Opposed to Whippa. I obviously don't agree with the government. I think that the government is a non-consensual entity that only exists because of violence, and the ability to force violence on other people is the trait of all monarchies and governments and democracies and republics and everything throughout history. It's for the majority of human history, we've had a violent ruler who all people must obey, or some kind of government that all people must obey, otherwise they will be violently persecuted, and any rules that they pronounce get claimed as the human authority over all the other humans, and anyone living in their area of rule, which is made up by a ton of different ridiculous ideas.
Orders
from who? But the idea that just because you live in an area of land as someone else, if they claim that they have authority over you, that's an illegitimate claim. There's no way two people living in the same area could claim authority over the other one because they're more popular by some vote or an instance of that. And that's where voluntarists have the biggest conflict with statism.
Do you have anything to respond to that, Whippa?
What? That someone doesn't own someone else? Well, yeah, that's why we did away with slavery. That's why that's no longer a thing.
Yeah, government is essentially slavery. The government acts as if it owns us. The whole point of the government is that it governs. It is humans governing other humans saying that they are allowed to and should be violently controlling other humans' lives, even if those other humans aren't necessarily hurting or destroying anyone else's property.
But what if those other humans do pose a threat? Like, I don't know, some coked up man who's got an AK-47 is
there's plenty of ways to take care of people like that without some big authoritarian figure that we all bow down to. There's plenty of ways for us to consensually start organizations to protect neighborhoods and locally come up with solutions to anomalies like people going crazy and committing violent acts. And if anyone does commit violent acts in a neighborhood, obviously the vast majority of the neighborhood is going to want to stop that person in any kind of civil society.
Yeah, but let's say that person takes out 10 other people, right?
That'd be unfortunate. And
absolutely, it would be terrible. But wouldn't it be amazing if it was preventable by, I don't know, a task force that had them in a database that, they were being monitored and their, movements.
How many of the mass shootings has the government not prevented in the past 20 years?
Probably plenty. We won't know because they haven't happened.
Yeah, a lot of them have happened. So many of them have happened, in fact. There's a shitload of them happening all the time under government rule.
Think how many there would be if there wasn't a government.
Government rule has never stopped it, and government rule never will stop it. It's society and people and the way that we set up ourselves to protect ourselves. If there's a whole lot of innocent and harmless people wandering around, defenseless people, I should say, then obviously that's going to be an easy target for anyone with a malicious intent, anyone that wants to commit violence on a mass.
The solution is to add more guns.
Yeah. If that's what's necessary to defend yourself, absolutely. If there's a society where people are going to shoot each other for no reason, then yes, you have to protect yourself.
I agree to a certain extent, but should those people have licenses?
No. Licenses for who? Licenses for what?
To own a gun.
To own a piece of metal?
A piece of metal that has the potential to kill someone at range.
Yeah, and so who should have those? Police officers who have the biggest
people who are trained to do it.
Past century? Trained? You think police officers are well trained to go about their combat situations?
I would trust a police officer any fucking day of the week over you with a firearm in a stressful situation where you're getting shot at.
Yeah, that might be.
Absolutely, I trust police.
Yeah, for sure. I'm much younger than the average police officer, and I'm less experienced with a gun. Absolutely.
Yes, you're less experienced because you don't have the training.
All right. Well, I would trust myself or someone similar to myself over a police officer any day.
Do you know the city of Chaz in America?
Themselves. Police officers have no obligation to protect the public, nor do they even try unless it's completely safe for them to do so.
Do you know the city of Chaz or Chop or whatever the fuck they call it in America now?
Chicago?
Capitol Hill organized protest. Chop.
All right.
They sectioned off a block.
Yep.
And it's exactly as you say, right? Complete anarchy. All the police, all the ambulance, everyone was kicked out. Everyone. Authority. They opened up the borders. Everyone was allowed in, except police and except ambulance. So right away, with anarchy, we still have fucking borders.
With anarchy?
Yes, there is anarchy. There is no government rule in this area. Okay. Right? Complete anarchy. They kicked out all the police. They kicked out all the ambulance. The mayor stood by and did nothing and allowed it to happen.
Okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to know what did end up happening?
What did end up happening?
They established borders, for starters, to keep out the police and the ambulance.
Yeah.
So straight away, there's a bit of an issue, right?
Yeah, well, that's just an unfortunate
the second thing that happened is they appointed a leader.
Yeah.
And that leader just so happened to be a drug kingpin who had access to firearms, which is part of the reason why he was appointed.
Obviously going to be the start
and was giving out AKs to anyone who would want to hold one.
Yep.
And the end results was that,
obviously that's not going to go well.
Don't quote me on the age, but I think it was an 8 or a 13-year-old child got shot.
Yep.
Because someone was giving out AKs to people to defend themselves, and those people weren't trained.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone that goes into the city of Chaz or Chop with a camera and looks like a reporter is immediately just hounded and harassed and beaten and kicked out.
That's pretty messed up as well. That's just violence.
Oh, absolutely. I 100% agree with you.
That's not what I would define as anarchy. That's statism. That's still violent rulers, well, at least a violent community imposing themselves on other people who are...
Anarchy, definition, a state of disorder due to an absence or non-recognition of authority or other controlling systems.
Yeah, sure. But
there was an absence of any actual definition or hierarchy.
It sounded like there was a ruler. You were just talking about him. Who was the guy you just talked about? Yeah, that's a ruler. He's clearly a violent ruler. If he was in charge and everybody was following him... That you disagree with. He was giving out guns.
You said there should never have been a ruler.
Yeah, there shouldn't have been. Then it's not a free place if there's a ruler to begin with.
And if there's borders.
Enforcing his own
and if
borders.
There's people kicking people out of places.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot like a government to me.
Yeah, so right after they kicked the government out, what did they do?
It's not what they did, it's what one
It is what they did.
It's what violent people did, though.
Violent people who kicked out the government. Anarchy.
They clearly took over their own little thing, and this is also just one very small and also very
recent.
Because this is inside America, correct?
Yeah.
Is that what you were saying? So that would mean that already immediately puts an insane amount of pressure on a little free community. And one of the biggest problems, I've got no surprise in me that a drug lord would take over, is because obviously the drug lords would already have a lot of pressure in America, but like outside of this little free community, any drug lord would obviously oppress. So as soon as a free place would turn up, where would all the drug lords want to go? To this little free place, which is inside America with borders somehow. Obviously, that's easily going to be abused by people trying to escape the state for all kinds of reasons, and also by the state itself is also going to have issues with that.
But how do you propose anarchy without violence?
I propose that. You mean how do we propose that it works, or how do we propose that it comes about?
Well, anarchy is a status disorder due to an absence or non-recognition of authority and other controlling systems, right?
Sure.
So that group there kicked out the police, the ambulance, the fireys, any form of governance, right?
Yeah.
And they did it with violence.
Yeah.
How would you do it without violence? Keep in mind, they said themselves that they were just protesters.
They kicked the police out with violence?
Yes.
Well, that's fair enough. The police are violent entities in themselves. The police
so it's fair enough if other people are violent trying to protect other citizens, then it's okay to be violent at them.
The police don't protect citizens. They protect themselves and the government.
That's their job.
That's
protect
what they say their
citizens.
Job is. Yeah, they do
it's
a shit
on the
job
side of their police cars
in extremely
America.
Shit job of it everywhere.
How would you do a better job?
Of it. You'd do it by local and possibly voluntary services. There's so many different ways to do it.
Right, but who gives authority to those people over other people to protect them?
No one. You don't need authority. That's the whole problem. The whole illusion of needing authority to do things is bullshit.
Then why should I listen to someone telling me to stop punching someone else?
Because you're committing a violent act. You're breaking the law of nature.
Yeah, but you don't have authority over me. Fuck you. Stay in your own business.
No.
You don't have authority over me. You can't tell me to stop punching this person.
You can still intervene to defend people who you're non-consensually abusing.
How are you going to intervene?
Well,
by restraining me, by shooting me, by tear gassing me?
If you're doing
so
that,
violently.
Violently.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can violently protect someone else if you're violently abusing them. Yeah.
Right, so then now what, outside of one being backed by the government and professionally trained and paid and provided with serviceable weapons, what's the difference between you and the police officers?
The cops very rarely actually protect people is the difference. The cops do a shit job of protecting people. They're very late to protect people. And they will always hesitate to protect people unless they have a huge amount of backup with them. Cops rarely engage in risky scenarios without a huge amount of backup.
Correct, because what looks worse? Cop waits for backup or cop shoots citizen whilst trying to save him?
Yeah, that's fine. But they're still
3-1 is way better than 1-on-1.
Yeah.
Especially in a hostage situation. 5-on-1, 15-on-1.
Mm-hmm,
have you seen those videos of people who have been tased like 5-10 times and they're still not going fucking down? And this is a taser. Keep in mind, it shoots like loads of volts of energy. I don't know the exact voltage, but it shoots fuck tons through. It hurts. And these people are still tanking. I saw a video, this fucking big black dude, right, that just dwarfed this small little white police officer chick. Just she got shanked.
Good.
And the guy got tased 3 times and they had to end up mag dumping 2 mags into him to bring him down.
Yeah. Yeah, heck. Well, it took a lot of effort to take him down then.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know what his crime was, a proposed crime. This is the biggest problem.
He stabbed a police officer.
Okay, cool. Police officers have shot and stabbed hundreds of black people. What's the crime in that?
The what?
Yeah, here's the problem with police officers. Police officers, on the vast majority, are not out protecting people. Police officers are out enforcing unjust rules, arresting people for owning things such as guns or drugs that are completely non-harmful, or most definitely not harmful to anyone who's not taking them, and enforcing just unjust and authoritarian laws and stealing money in ways of like
taxes?
Yeah, taxes. Exactly.
Okay, here's something we'll agree on. Taxes at the moment are way too fucking high.
Yeah,
Let's draw some common ground. Way too high at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's a fairly libertarian stance.
However, taxes should still exist. Why? Because do you use roads? Do you use traffic lights, bridges?
Yeah, sure, but you're suggesting they
public
only
services
exist because of the government. We can still have those things without the government. We can still create those things without the government. And the government creates those things extremely slowly and extremely inefficiently.
All right, the government is massive, right?
Sure.
It's a massive entity.
Yes, it is. It's huge.
Who would lead that massive entity?
Who would? What do you mean, who would?
That's what I'm asking. Who would
No one should.
No one should lead this massive entity.
Clearly. It shouldn't exist in the first place. It's a violent entity, and it's restricting and terrifying millions of people throughout the world. I'm talking about the state in general, but
are you scared because you don't understand it, or because
no?
Like, let's circle back to the drug sort of thing, right? Where you believe that people should own drugs and be able to use them, right? Especially if it's not like someone else isn't taking the drugs. Why should I be worried about someone else taking drugs?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Well, let's put it like this: I've got a mate who has a brother who's going to die because of the amount of cocaine that he intakes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
Now, there are still restrictions. There are still loads of things, and that's the only reason he's not fucking dead yet, because it's difficult to get.
Yeah.
Let's take those restrictions away. He's dead.
Yeah.
Right, so how could we prevent that?
By having a society that talks about it better, that gets help to people quicker, that will talk about it openly, and having support systems that work anonymously and help people go into rehab without having to go through any bullshit.
But those systems need to be, like, I mean, not everyone has the time to run around and find these people, right? You need to be able to access these people. For that, there needs to be database, there needs to be staff that are hired to go out and say, hey, how you doing? There needs to be people professionally trained, because not anyone can
go, like, searching for these
not
people.
anyone can just walk up to someone and be like, oh, you know, like, it's okay, dude. All you need to do is go to this rehab. You'll find, like, there's professional training that's needed for all this.
Yeah.
So who's going to fund all that training? Who's going to participate in that? Because if you do it just off of a voluntary basis, it becomes this, well, it's not my problem. It's not my mate's brother who's fucking dying of coke. It's not, why should I give a shit?
Firstly, it's the man's own choice. And, like, yes, he is on drugs, and yes, he's addicted to those drugs, and it's very unfortunate. It's terrible. I'm sorry to hear it. But still, that chemical exists in reality. The guy found this chemical and continues to consensually, voluntarily take this, right? And it ultimately is his own choice. If someone wants to OD, that should be their own permission to OD on whatever drug they want to. Yes, sir.
In saying that, with drugs, don't you think, like when it comes to addiction to drugs particularly, that there should be some intervention outside of themselves due to it being a substance that gets them hooked onto it and influences them to keep going and possibly OD down the track?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, intervention in the form of friends, family, and charities who go into people who are willing to get help. They're all great things. And intervention for people that care for people in struggling positions that struggle with any kind of substance addiction. That's great that there's people around to help, and I would highly recommend anyone help anyone who's like in such a situation. But there's no need for some huge entity that's based off violence and stealing to need to bring in paid people to somehow stop this substance from existing on the streets, which is ridiculous and immoral, or somehow, intervene in people's homes, raid people's homes, which is often what they end up doing, given the amount of military equipment that they get given, raiding a lot of homes and using violent means on the people to try and restrict just a tiny amount of the one chemical that you can use peaceful interventions in to take care of the people that are affected by it.
So, just tracking back a little bit with that, are you implying with the support system that's out there for people who are addicted to drugs, is that a voluntary thing you're saying, for them to voluntarily walk into rehab and that kind of stuff? Or
yeah. Well, I'm saying that like anyone in the position to intervene with someone who's clearly having their brain struggle a lot with substance abuse, like a friend or a family member or someone from a charity who knows someone else fairly well and's been seeing someone, anything along those lines. I'm 100% supporting like intervention from a friend or family member or anyone else like that to help somebody in need who has problems with substance addiction. Even
if it's involuntary.
Yeah. So that's where the line gets drawn, and this will often come up to the individual as well. And honestly, it's a very hard situation. Like I would assume for example, you're suggesting that if a friend has another friend who has a terrible alcohol or substance addiction and will die from that, how much but doesn't want help for it, how much should the other friend be allowed to intervene? Something like that, right? Is what you're saying.
Yeah.
If the person isn't consenting to help, then yeah, that is a very tough situation, and obviously it'd be suck to be that person's friend and to want to be able to do something for them to help them improve, but not be able to. And you know, if you really think that you can help someone come back if you save them this one time or second time, even if they complain, I'm okay with that. And obviously you're not going to get a lot of shit from other people if you go out and save someone's life by like holding them back from shooting themselves or something like that. You're not at all like taking pills out of someone's mouth. You're not gonna get shit for trying to save someone else's life. And you know, often if it's substance abuse, they're probably in such a state that they can barely function in the first place. So no one's gonna get at you for trying to save someone else's life if they're under serious substance abuse in extreme circumstances. Like absolutely, I'd be okay with intervention in that situation. But that's a very specific situation. That you would probably prefer someone who knows them very closely to be the one intervening.
If I may, let's take this to a sort of lighter area, because we went a little bit dark
we
there.
did go very dark.
Anyway, children getting raped.
Oh, that's yeah.
Right. So let's say that you are able to overthrow the government peacefully.
Yeah. Sure.
And they surrender their massive positions of power and their massive armies, massive arsenals, and none of it goes missing because none of those trained soldiers would see what the fuck's about to go down and the fallout of it, and definitely wouldn't stock up on any of the weapons and tanks and jeeps and armored vehicles that they've got there. Let's say that all of that is going, and all is released evenly and distributed amongst all of the general population, right?
Yeah.
Let's say that happens.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to control things that are obviously wrong, like child pornography and the assault of children and sexual assault? Like, are you just going to gear up and spend the rest of your days warring with pedophiles? I mean, you can't be everywhere at once. You can't be in the Congo trying to fight. You can't, like...
Yeah. Absolutely. We're all people, man, and we can only do so much. That's really true. And this is the thing. We're approaching the government and its legitimacy for its existence from very different angles. You're like, well, the perspective that you're taking is these are all the problems in the world. What could a government do to fix them? Whereas I see it as, yes, there's lots of problems in the world. The problems have always been here, and there's problems that will always exist. We've always had problems, and there's always going to be things that aren't so great in society. But I believe that a giant authority figure is just going to cause even more problems. And that's where we come into differences. I'm like, okay, there's a terrible thing going on where that's causing a shitload of problems that's called the state or the government. And you're like, well, we've got all these problems. What can the state do to possibly fix these? Which is like very different perspectives on how to look at the government and its legitimacy. I just want to make that clear as I see it. As the government isn't necessary to fix the majority of problems, and that consensual interaction between people can solve 99% of people's problems just as well as the government can, if not better. That's the argument for the dissolution of the state. The state creates more problems, and so for the example of like child pornography, there's tons of hackers, of willing like vigilantes out there that are more than willing to stop things like that, track down things like that. There's still plenty of very intelligent private people that are very willing to use their skills for good. I've seen a lot of news actually. This doesn't get much coverage, but there's a lot of people who are willingly want to go out and be a vigilante to stop crime, to stop terrible non-consensual acts from happening. But obviously, everywhere in the world right now, we have a state, we have a government, and states and governments hate vigilantes. Vigilantes show that we don't need the government to fight violent crime. Vigilantes going out in their own free time or getting sponsored to go out and to help people, to save people, to possibly violently intervene in terrible situations. There's so many people like this, or who would be willing to do it, but that the state stops. There's no violent intervention allowed whatsoever, unless perhaps right there. You're not allowed to go out and be a vigilante.
Let me respond to this vigilante thing, right?
Yeah.
The government doesn't like vigilante because if something goes wrong, which it at some point undoubtedly will, whether it's friendly fire or, so you got the wrong target, right? Sent off to the wrong person. How is the government going to hold someone who they don't know, who has killed someone else, accountable? The reason why police officers and military and all of that have badges and identifying IDs and are now carrying body cams and everything like that is to hold people who have fucked up accountable. A vigilante doesn't have that. You cannot hold a vigilante accountable. You can't, if they fuck up, right?
Yeah.
And they get the wrong target, or they go rogue, or this or that, whatever happens, you can't hold that person accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very true.
So how would you? Because they're not going to surrender themselves in. You're going to have to go and chase that fucker down.
You're saying if a vigilante starts doing dodgy shit and turning bad per se,
or even fucks up and shoots a child by accident, right? Friendly fire.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Well, that'd be a terrible thing, and obviously no one would like that, and there would be repercussions to pay. Any family members would likely be back on that person and want to do something about it. And obviously, if that vigilante then is just going to try and disappear, then they're going to be hiding, or they're going to have some kind of societal system. And there's so many ways to do this, by the way, outside of the government. It's still very easy to have a societal system to track people, to have a kind of justice outside of some kind of supreme government leader that people can still voluntarily enforce, and through communities bring justice to people and have funded places. If there are super violent people, we can have funded jails where obviously if a vigilante shoots the wrong damn person, some innocent, or such a child, like you said, there will be places for people to lock us up. And this is one of the things that isn't considered much with anarchy, I think, is that the government steals a huge amount of human resources. And if the amount that it takes alone from businesses, big businesses and small businesses, the government takes millions of dollars, in America billions and billions of dollars, from every little business that's trying to just make a living. And the amount of tax isn't just one big tax. There's lots and lots of little taxes, so it's all very, very hidden costs. Whenever we buy something, we pay a tax, and whenever the company does something, we have to pay a tax. Whenever they earn, we got to pay tax. Whenever I earn, we got to pay tax. And all these little taxes add up to a huge amount of human resources taken away. And if that wasn't such a thing, we would have businesses and individuals would have a huge amount more funds to give to charitable causes such as, crime prevention and charities to look after people in any kind of way necessary. We've already got people like Bill Gates and so many other very rich, productive, successful, and respectable people give millions and millions of dollars for those exact reasons, to provide charity and to provide safety for people who don't have it. There's already so much goodness coming out of businesses who are able to succeed even within the state.
Because tax exemptions.
Yeah, exactly. And lots of people do get around taxes.
That's their only incentive to do so. I agree with you.
Possibly.
I agree with you.
Some people,
there's too many taxes, right?
Yeah.
That's something we both agree on.
Yeah,
but taxes pay for a lot of the things that you benefit from.
Yeah, that's the thing. if the government does things extremely expensively and extremely slowly, it is terrible at employing people. It is terrible at getting jobs done efficiently. The problem with a lot of the government agencies is that there's no competition for it. If there's a problem, the government will just pour more money into it until it's fixed. The government's not like a company. Companies are competitive. Companies are efficient. Companies focus on the time and the resources being spent. Governments don't give a fuck about any of that.
No, do you think the government is out there? Let's use road building as an example. Do you think the governments are out there on their hands and knees building roads?
I mean,
no. Who do you think is building those roads?
But the workers.
Yeah, builders.
Yeah.
Who are part of building companies who are all
often
competing for that massive paycheck that the government is going to provide, right?
Yeah.
And it gets that paycheck from the people who want that road built.
You're talking like it wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the government. Obviously, cars are great forms of communication, transportation, that is, and we all want cars and roads to be able to
Stop jerking off, Wraith.
No. But we all want...
Apologies.
We all want transportation.
I was getting ready for later.
Fair enough. Get that hentai up. But, like, we all want transportation. We all want roads, at least the vast majority of people seem to. So therefore, there's so many ways of us paying companies locally or even on a large scale, but online. There's so many ways to organize these things without having some violent dictator do things very slowly and very inefficiently. If the government and private industries organize these things themselves, we would waste so much time, so much money, and we wouldn't need any kind of violent stealing from the government to even get things done. It's not necessary. It's completely unnecessary. Yes.
How do you know that the government is the one that controls how efficiently, how effective, how many people are employed for a certain project?
That sounds like it comes down to the company or the builder doing it.
It can.
In the road example.
They are bad at it. They're notoriously bad at it. It's
the government or the business? The
government at overspending. So the companies know this, and the companies they work around this very smartly, because so they get the most money out of the government. There's for example, like a toilet block in America that costs the government $2 million out of their budget to build, and it's a very average toilet block. And and you drive down the streets in Australia. They show the signs conveniently for the budget spent on a lot of the roads, and obviously roads spend a lot to build, take a lot to build, and take a lot of resources to build. But the huge amount of money that the government spends on things is insanely unnecessary. The police are one of the biggest examples of that. They're insanely inefficient. They've got no competition, and therefore they've got no motivation to improve at any significant rate, because there's nothing around even like them. They've got nothing to keep them progressing and keep them improving. They are the power, and there's very little that can stop the police from being the power in question, and that in most situations that they experience, and therefore they are very inefficient. They'll spend a lot of money on completely unnecessary things.
Have you played the game Borderlands?
No.
Borderlands is a fantastic game.
Sure.
Right? Beautiful.
Nice.
And it, in a sense, is the very essence of anarcho-capitalism.
Oh, really?
What it'll almost divulge it to.
I'll have my own opinion on that, but yeah.
Borderlands, it has a whole series. Beautiful game. Fantastic. But essentially what you have is the most popular companies in the entirety of Borderlands are the people that sell guns, ammunition, and medical supplies.
Yeah.
And that's about it. And the reason is because if I have a bigger gun than you can't tell me what the fuck to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
And let's take a real world look, like a real world example for this, right? I'm not sure if you know much about Venezuela, right? I was recently looking up Venezuela for a trip I wanted to go get some underage pussy. But
fair enough.
Really, what I found was quite depressing. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but there is a massive market for cigarettes in Venezuela. Absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Part of the reason is that there is no no limit to how young you can be and smoke and purchase cigarettes and use cigarettes.
All right. Okay.
Right? So the end result is that you now have 8-year-olds that are smoking a pack a day, which is a legitimate thing. That like Vice did a fantastic little mini documentary on this, and you are more than welcome to have a look after this. But,
Yeah, I saw that one. That was a good one.
yeah, no, it's really good, right? But the issue is that there's no monopoly of one cigarette company or this or that. They're all competing. They've all got their own brands, their own marketing, this and that.
Yeah.
And kids see this, right? It's one of the few, Venezuela is one of the few countries that still allow cigarette ads on television.
Yeah.
And, to openly like publicize their existence, right? And you see cigarette ads everywhere in Venezuela.
Yeah.
And they've got television ads that kids are watching on their cartoons, right? And it's all these cool people who are, smoking and surfing, and it's like Red Bull ads, but for cigarettes. It's fucking nuts. It's insane.
I know what kind
But we all agree that smoking is unhealthy, right?
Yeah.
Like, I hope people would agree that children smoking is bad.
Yeah.
8-year-olds who should have guidance and should have an authoritative figure like a father or a mother should guide them and tell them, hey, that's bad, you shouldn't do that.
That would be better, yeah.
I agree,
For sure.
right? But here's the thing, with anarchy, anything, right? Like, can a parent
That is true.
their child properly?
There is nothing stopping a child from going out and buying cigarettes and such.
Yeah, but you support that, and you're okay with that.
Yes.
Why?
Just because you can't stop a child from buying a damn freaking plant offcuts.
Yes, you can, by having laws that say they can't.
Or you can have shopkeepers that would refuse. For example, if any shopkeepers around here had like a 10-year-old walk in, it wouldn't be because of a law that would stop them. Or at least you wouldn't hope so.
Therein lies
You'd
the
hope
issue.
with or without the law. Yeah, the issue is societal. It's got nothing to do with government, what's allowed or not. That would never go down very well over here.
You're right, the issue is society. Society fucking sucks, which is why we have a government.
No, society completely...
To tell us what the fuck to do, because otherwise we're dumb as shit.
No, society completely depends on the area and the behavior of the people in the society, and different societies...
And the laws.
...are different. Yeah, the laws come in as well, 100%. They can impact
the
society.
law. And
They can impact society. But
who says what is law?
in our society here, we would not be selling tobacco to children. There was the adults, almost not a single adult in Australia would stand for that. Would stand for a little kid walking up and buying cigarettes.
I agree.
So, like, a shopkeeper wouldn't do it, even if there was a law in Australia.
Why wouldn't he? It's free business.
No, they're not going to sell it to kids. And then what happens if the kid walks home? What are they going to do? Tell their parents? Or if the parent even sees it, they're going to be like, "Oh, where the hell did they get this from?" They're going to go beat you up, or they're going to go in.
Why should that parent go and beat up that shopkeeper? That shopkeeper didn't harm anyone. That shopkeeper just sold a product to a customer.
Sure. You do have a point there.
Right. So the solution is to beat up people. Oh, but you can't beat up people because
no
one has domain over anyone.
But I'm not talking about what's moral and what's not right now. I'm talking about society. So that's what will happen in an Australian society, and that for that exact reason, it would probably be unlikely that many shopkeepers would want to ever sell things to children. Where, for example, in Venezuela, you wouldn't get in trouble for it, and neither would the kid. So therefore,
I saw in chats where there were some underage kids going and buying cigarettes, and sure they weren't 8 years old, but they were like 13, 14, right? Still dumb kids that are still learning, right? Chats. I saw a full fight break out over it because two other cunts came in and said, "Oh, don't sell cigarettes to this guy. He's underage. Check his ID." And then the guy got pissed because he was like, "Oh, shut the fuck up!" And then there was a big punch up. It was fantastic. I actually filmed it, and then I got a dirty eye from some of the other mates of them, and I was like, "Well, I don't want to get beat up, so I'm probably just going to stop filming here." But the guy actually got taken outside, and one of them was on top of the other, and there was a whole big crowd around them. Like, "Oh, stop!" And the guy looked up and turned around, and he saw all these people around him. And fucking dead ass, he stared at these people in the eye, and like his hands were around this dude's head. It did one big old smack in the pavement, got up off of him, and there was like blood on the pavement and everything. Anyway, the point is, right, is even with these laws, right, there is still this shit happening, and the law is meant to be a deterrent. It's meant to be a line in the sand, a moral line in the sand that you should follow, right? And if you don't, you're going to get fined, right? If you're the shopkeeper, right? Because that's better than beating the fuck out of the small Asian lady who didn't know any better, who sold them the cigarettes, right?
Sure.
I'd say a fine is better than that.
Yeah, sure, but it's not going to happen very much. It's going to be pretty well known in an Australian society that you don't sell cigarettes to kids, and it'd obviously be very much dependent on the.
So you're against a freedom of market then?
Society. No, I'm not saying I'm against it at all.
Then why should that shopkeeper not sell cigarettes to that kid?
Well, it's their own damn choice. If you want to sell tobacco to a child,
yeah, what the fuck's stopping them?
Society, the people. Who
what are the people going to do? No, the people can't. No, keep in mind, people can't fight them. Freedom of market. The answer is not violence, Jake.
I'm not saying they should or shouldn't, but it would be very unpopular to.
Yeah, so his business then wouldn't be coming from the adults, in your theory.
I'm not saying what people should or shouldn't do. I'm talking about the way society is structured for us to allow such a thing to happen. Whereas in Venezuela, like no one would bat an eye if a child was smoking a cigarette. But in Australia, a lot of adults make a big deal out of it, and therefore we would behave very differently compared to the way that it's handled in Venezuela.
We would. You want to know what part of the reason why we do know all this shit about cigarettes?
Yeah.
Education. Venezuela doesn't have a fantastic education.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the reason why we have a great education is privatization of schools. You can obviously give it to them, but also public schools, which are funded by the government.
Yeah, which are funded by people. The government doesn't own anything that it hasn't already stolen. The government doesn't whip up money and education out of nowhere. It steals it and then provides it.
No, it doesn't steal it. If you live in Australia, right, the government's not going to force you to live in Australia. If you live in Australia, which you chose to, then you need to live by that place's laws.
You were born into Australia. You don't choose to live in Australia. And what are you going to do? Like swim out to sea if you don't consent to living in Australia?
I choose to be born!
Yeah.
No!
You didn't choose to be born.
No one chose to be born to Australia, but you chose to stay here.
You don't choose to stay here. It costs an insane amount of resources and time to go anywhere outside of Australia. It's not hard. It's not easy to immigrate anywhere.
There's fresh 18-year-olds who are going out on fucking Eurogap years for an entire year, and they can just live off of hitchhiking. Nothing's stopping you from doing that. Nothing's stopping you from being homeless and not getting taxed.
That's true. But
if you wanted to live in Australia and you wanted to not pay taxes, just be homeless, or just earn under the tax, because there is a limit, right?
That shouldn't be necessary. That should not be necessary. There should be no violent force controlling how people live in the first place.
You say it's violent. It's only violent if you fuck up and don't do,
If you fuck up. It's only violent if you smoke a little bit of weed and get your door knocked in and go to jail for years. Yeah, it's only violent when that happens.
I have got so many friends who deal weed and smoke weed, and none of them have been in violent situations until they've resisted arrest.
Yeah.
Until they've been like, fuck you, cop. You can't tell me what to do. Swing. And then guess what happens when he swings in his face? Then 2 or 3 or 4 of his other buddies are like, okay, well, that's a bit of a dick move. You've now tried to fight this guy. Well, we're going to fight you back.
Obviously, that's what cops do. That's just typical cop behavior.
Exactly, because safety's in numbers. Yeah. Speaking of which, safety's in numbers is one of the most well-known things, right?
Yep.
So who's going to lead those numbers?
You don't need a leader for the numbers. That's a complete illusion.
Yeah, you do.
No, you don't.
Yeah, you do.
No, you don't.
You absolutely do. Let's take a look at something that is animal, right? Wolves. They have packs. They have a leader. All throughout the entire history of civilization, before governments, before massive things, there has always been a leader. People have always leaned to there being a leader and voted for leaders because they have survived the longest. They are the most efficient, right?
That doesn't mean that one leader should have a violent control over a geographical area because they're popular in a certain area. That still doesn't give any legitimacy to violent rule.
But the people who live in that area voted for that person to take care of them and to support them. Right, but no, and let's say that you don't, right? In Australia, we've got the House of Representatives, which is to represent the minority. They don't vote for that.
And they still shouldn't have any authority over the people.
How do you know they're doing a shit job?
They are doing a shit job.
How? Because they didn't vote for anarcho-capitalism?
Well, I'm not talking about the voters. I'm talking about the government.
So the government's doing a shit job representing your ideas, which is anarcho-capitalism.
I mean, that's not a stretch of a claim to make. I'm saying that the government is doing a shit job of violently ruling a whole population when really a minority voted for them. Not everyone in Australia votes, and they only need a certain amount of votes to get into power, and not even 100% of Australia. Well, over 50% of Australians need to vote for one of them to be in power. It only needs to be a percentage of the voters, which is already off-cutting a fair amount of people who just don't want to give a fuck.
Well, this isn't America, right? You have to vote in Australia. Otherwise, I'll probably be a fine.
Oh, yeah, but that doesn't stop people from not voting. There's plenty of people not on the system.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right, but what are you going to do about that? Like, there's nothing you really can do. If they choose to live off the grid, then...
No, but it's still immoral for any kind of ruler to just claim that they rule over you because you're...
No, they didn't claim. They were voted there. They were voted into power.
They weren't voted over your property, though. They were voted over some huge geographical area.
The land of Australia.
Yeah, which...
Voted for by Australians who live on that land.
That doesn't mean that they own the entire land, and that doesn't mean that anyone who's just voted by some people voting by slips of paper, that someone can control with force the rules that everyone in a geographical area has to abide by. That's insanely immoral and ridiculous.
The government doesn't own the land that we, like, for example, right? I buy a house.
No,
Who am I buying it from? Another person.
Dude, the government takes your land whenever they want to. The government, that's a big thing right now, actually. A ton of people all around my area have had their land stripped by the government because the government wants land here. You do not own anything in Australia. The government owns everything, and the government will take it if it wants it, and they very happily do. That's what the castle's about, but the castle wasn't just some kind of fantasy story. It's very real, and usually the individual loses against the government. The government steals land off people all the time. I've seen it in multiple states. I've heard multiple stories. There's been petitions everywhere about it. The government steals what it wants when it wants.
I don't feel comfortable commenting on your personal situation because I know nothing about it, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know the people involved. I don't know what's going on.
Sure.
So I can't really make a comment on that. But from my understanding, one of the few case scenarios in which the government can take your land is if it declares a state of emergency. Which is, for example, when we're at war, which I'd like to think the government would protect me when we're at war. I mean, obviously, it's probably going to do drafts, right? Because they're going to need people to protect other people.
Right. That's also very immoral, but sure.
Sorry?
Yeah, I also find drafts very immoral for evident reasons, but yeah, sure.
I mean... There's sort of two types of drafts, isn't there? There's like a draft as in, oh yeah, come volunteer for the war. And then there's like, hey, we're losing it. If we don't win this war, the Nazis are going to take over, and that would be bad. So we need your bitch ass, who is very capable of holding a rifle, on the front lines. Yeah. Thank you. Now go murder.
That's what a draft is. Yeah.
Yeah. Correct. Right. But the result of that was now we are not under Nazi rule. Fantastic.
I guess.
Yes.
Sure. It's states fighting states.
You do guess.
Yeah. No, look, states have always been terribly violent, and they always continue to increase in violence and increase in their authoritarian measures. People are complaining, for example, like all the boomers complain about how there were so few laws back then, and there were so fewer taxes and all that shit, because it's true, the government's always increased in power over time. This is one of the problems that I have with other libertarians who say that, oh, just a little government will be okay. How about we just have just the police and the army per se, and tax people as little as possible and leave people alone. And that has been tried. That was tried in, for example, America. America is one of the best examples of a country that started off extremely libertarian, but it very, very quickly turned into an authoritarian nightmare, as does every other state over time. And over time, as the state grows and becomes more powerful and has more people to steal more taxes off, it has much more influence to control and monitor the population. And states just always get worse over time. There's so much restriction, even in today, where a lot of people aren't allowed to leave their houses sometimes. Which, I don't really want to bring COVID in the conversation, or we could. It definitely gets complicated with
because it puts holes in your argument. But
I mean, we can talk about it if you want to, if that's the way you see it. But sure.
No, I'd much rather talk about massive mega corporations that would then take over once we remove government, because government is one of the few things that sort of stand in between us and them. And whilst I do concede, let me finish. Whilst I do concede and admit that governments definitely do take bribes, and they absolutely can do a terrible, shitty fucker job of their one job, right, when it comes to these things. Mega corporations, but there's a few things where they do sort of like help us out a bit, right? And if we do remove them, let's say Coca-Cola goes back to putting cocaine in their drinks and all this stuff, right? But they don't have to list that they've put cocaine back into it to make it addictive.
It'll be discovered fairly quickly, I'm sure. But yes.
I mean, only if they wanted to.
No, not if they wanted to. We can test Coke, and if there was any kind of change in the Coke, people can still test Coke and detect cocaine in it. That's their
cool, but by that stage, you've already built up the market. In fact, once people found out, they might actually be more inclined to buy Coke. I mean, I don't like Coke now, but if it had a bit of that good, you know what I'm saying? I'd be more inclined. Like, you got yourself another fucking customer. I got shit to do. I got business. Yeah, look.
It's very true.
But like, we know cocaine is really not that healthy, or it's at least isn't sustainable. That's for sure. Like, what the fuck is going to stop people from cutting out? Like, for example, let's take a look at Macca's and their patties, right? There's already a massive debate, like, what the fuck is in these things,
Yeah.
Well, imagine if we take out government regulation of those patties. Lord fucker knows what they'll be. It's going to be fucking human.
If they're putting dodgy shit in the patties, then we're still not going to buy from that company.
Yeah, but how are you going to tell? It still tastes the same. You're not going to suspect anything. They just made it for horse meat.
There's plenty of ways of finding out what's in shit, and there's so many ways that consumers can make sure they're consuming safe products without some violent overlord trying to take care of it for them.
But you can do that anyway nowadays by boycotting a company like Nestle stealing everyone's fucking water in Africa. You can do it by boycotting it. You have that power now. The government's not stopping you from not buying somewhere. Sorry.
Exactly.
Phoenix, you had something that you were saying.
Yeah. Shit, I'm losing it. So. Fuck, I forgot.
Fucking nice one.
It was.
You fucked your one chance.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, try to get back to it.
Coke. Businesses, big businesses. Okay, so you talked about if Coke started putting cocaine into their drinks. Jake, you talked about it being like, people would realize that and they'd be like, F that, we don't want that.
Yeah, sure.
You would move away from that company, right? Yeah. But they're so big. And this particularly applies to big tech companies.
Okay.
They control us so
They don't
much.
Control us. No,
YouTube,
they
Google,
provide products.
Facebook. They provide
we choose to use all of those. Those are all private companies that we choose to use. And I don't choose to use Google.
Do you read the terms and conditions, Jake?
Of what?
Of any of your iPhone or of an app that you download?
No.
And the thing is with that, let's say with Facebook recently, there's been a lot of privacy issues, and that's not good. And there's a lot of examples of YouTube being pieces of shit, not treating their creators correctly. But and a previous discussion has been jump platforms. It's easy. There are better platforms out there that actually serve their people better.
Which in Mixer.
Yes, as well as other things closely similar to YouTube. But the issue is YouTube's so big, Facebook's so big, Twitch is so big, Google's so big. How can you get away from it? Even if they do the wrong things, you will still voluntarily invest into them and choose to use their services because of how big they've grown, how much freedom they give you.
And some people might. It depends on the individual. But sorry, continue.
That's true. But as how much freedom they give you, and how much information they've got available to you, but you still would choose to ignore the issues that they've had. Is that not now?
Make the question more defined.
call me out if I'm wrong here.
Yeah,
Is that not like the government as well? There are plenty of good laws with the government, and there are plenty of good things that they do, but there are also bad things that they do.
Yeah.
And there's like a bunch of shitty stuff that they do. But the issue is that we, to an extent, it feels like, and we've talked about volunteering and that kind of stuff, especially with charity stuff and things that the government currently funds. But it feels like we are codependent on the government. And that's the same with these big tech companies, what I was saying. We are codependent on them, hence we can't move away from them.
Not particularly, really. Like,
not extremely.
Yeah.
But a lot of, like, when Facebook had issues with their privacy, how many people do you think actually left the platform? There would be a lot,
not too many.
but not too many.
I did.
But not a relative amount,
Yeah, exactly.
I don't use Facebook or Google.
But everyone else probably does, because they're
100%.
on it.
Yeah.
And yes, Facebook's fixed itself a bit, but back then, it was a big thing. It was in the news, we all know it, but
Nice.
we were codependent on Facebook because everyone uses Facebook. It's not easy to move everyone off that platform. And the same
also, quickly as well with that, let's use Twitch and Mixer, right, as a bit of an example of this. Now, I'm not saying that this is what happens, but let's use it as like we all know Twitch and Mixer, right?
Yeah.
That's something everyone understands. Mixer's a streaming service, Twitch is a streaming service. Mixer's trying to compete with Twitch. Let's say that Mixer is trying to do it, but then Twitch has made a lot of money with Google, which is currently what everyone, most people are using, right? Google is this massive thing. It's convenient. It's got everything that we need. It holds everything that we've got, right? At the moment, it's just super convenient, super efficient. They've got everything, streamlined. And let's say Twitch and Google have been working together for years, right? They've made billions together, like crazy amounts of money together. Fantastic. That's a working relationship. Yep. Now, let's say Mixer is trying to come into the mix. See what I did there? And Twitch isn't happy with it. All Twitch has to do is be like, "Hey Google, I'd like to call in a favor. Here's 3 private islands. Don't advertise Mixer. Don't do this. Don't do that." Right?
Yeah. That'd be unfortunate for Mixer. Sure.
It would be.
Yeah.
Except, guess what?
What?
We have a government that has laws against monopolies, and yes, they still do sort of exist, but that's also more because they are the best service that's available. And also because I guess a lot of that shit isn't advertised because they are keeping things under the radar, right? But it's just going to happen without the government there as well.
No, it just happens under the table. There's plenty of those kind of things happening that people just don't find out about. Like, every now and again, we actually find one of them and it gets brought out and there's whistleblowers. But plenty of that shady shit happens under the table with nobody knowing.
So you would rather that... I mean, even without the government, it's still going to happen under the table. They're not going to advertise that they're trying to shut down a competitor.
Yeah, of course.
Right, but the government forces them now they have to be more sneaky about it. They have to be more careful with it. As opposed to just not telling you and they could just make a,
so you're arguing that the government stops Google from changing its search engine to
what?
favor Twitch over Mixer?
No, I'm saying that mega corporations now, by law, they can't have a monopoly. They can't push out and force the little guy by bullying them, right? And it still does sort of happen to a certain extent as well, right? But part of that is on us. We're not giving the little guy a chance. I mean, I never used Mixer. I don't really use Twitch either, but I mean, that was being run by Microsoft. They poured millions of dollars into that. Just getting fucking what was his name? Ninja into that streaming service as well, right? They signed a massive deal with them.
It would,
and even with Microsoft, right? Which in this situation, this multi-billion-dollar corporation is the little guy in this situation, right?
Sure.
They weren't successful. So what fucking hope does Gerard in his little basement have?
You don't have hope. You just don't have hope on Google then, clearly.
Right. So
just don't use Google.
He has to make a new Google now.
No, he doesn't have to make a new Google. He can still promote his place on plenty of other sites. There's lots of people use all kinds of sites to find information, not Google. You can advertise on any other site but Google. Just because you can't advertise on Google doesn't mean you can't advertise. You can still advertise on any other private site.
Right, but no one really wants to use those other sites. The only reason why I used fucking Bing was to get to Google and download it and probably make it.
Engines. I'm talking about like websites, like Reddit, for example. You could advertise on so many other platforms, like Facebook, like any of the other social medias, any gaming forums. You can advertise on Steam and all kinds of places. There's plenty of places to advertise that aren't Google.
Yeah, but I'm saying as a mega corporation, it would be in conjunction with a lot of those main advertising sites.
Yeah, sure.
And they'd strike deals, and they'd be like, "Hey, don't advertise this. He's a potential competitor. We're worried. We're just going to wait him out until he, doesn't have enough money to continue, or we just buy him out."
All right. Well, that's economics, and that's business as well.
Yeah, that's business. That's competition, right?
Yeah.
And that's competition. That's business without any regulations. You can apply this to anything. They'll just force the little guy out, and the big corporations will keep getting bigger.
A lot of ways. There's a lot of ways a little guy can stay in. Like, it's not just Twitch just can't put a heap of money out there just to shut down Mixer. And like I
don't think a GoFundMe page compares to the government.
No, I'm not saying that it would. But there's plenty of other ways for little guys, whether in real life or online, to promote their content and to start a business.
How?
What do you mean how? Like how?
Well, you keep saying there's all these different ways. Okay, we'll name them. Let's go into detail about this.
The internet.
The internet is real life.
I feel like Phoenix is putting his hand up because we're going over time.
Yeah. So we're kind of going a little over time.
Bitch, we're going to fill that terabyte worth of space.
Yeah.
We have to start deleting some porn now, boy.
All right. What I'm gonna say, Whippa, Jake, give us your final statement, starting with Jake.
Okay. Look, there's plenty of solutions in the world that don't necessarily need violent force. The government has put it in our heads for so many years, and for so much of society over so long has, like Ben said, looked up to a leader, needed some kind of violent figurehead of authority. But there's no need for one person to claim violent authority over an entire geographical location of many individuals who may very well disagree with that person. There's no need for one violent individual to control all the people, for people to have a peaceful and prosperous society. And we can solve many of the issues of humanity through peaceful and economic means rather than the violent force of governments.
Very good.
Yeah.
And Whipper?
I mean, look, I need a glass of whiskey for starters, and I would implore anyone who watches this, and I'm going to go through this with you three here afterwards. Sure. Watch Anarcho-Capitalism, the movie. It's a 7-minute long movie. I know it's pretty long. It was made 3 years ago. It's the funniest fucking shit ever.
It's funny.
It goes into what anarcho-capitalism would be if it were taken to an extreme. Let's say, right?
Yeah, it's extremely unrealistic for so many reasons. And also,
these are my closing arguments, Jake.
Sorry.
Get the fuck back. It is a fantastic movie, and the issue with it is that there is no issue. This is what would happen, in my opinion, right? And the reason why I don't like anarcho-capitalism is that they're very pick and choose with, for example, like Jake said that, oh yeah, well, with the example of cigarettes, well then that, parent would just go and bash up the shop people. That's violence, right? I
never said they should have done that. I'm saying that's a societal response to a certain issue.
My closing arguments.
That was moral, yeah, but you're putting words in my mouth.
Okay, Whipper, focus on yourself.
Look, the issue with anarchy is that it's inefficient. It doesn't make sense. The reason why we went from being nomadic to tribal, and from tribalism to building up bigger villages, and those villages turning into cities, and those cities having multiple sister cities, which then turned into states and governments, is because it's efficient, and because lots of people agree that it was best, right?
All right.
That's why we went, and it seems completely stupid to then turn around and undo all of those years of progress,
Be undone.
all those years of, like if we go now and just separate, who's going to stop you from the lions in the Sahara, right? It's like, you're on your own now. You ain't got no one protecting you. No one has to give a shit about you. You're on your own.
Well, very good. Thank you, Whippa, for joining us. And thank you, both you, Jake, and Whippa, for having this discussion and be willing to step up and talk about it and also entertain the viewers as well as me and Wraith. It's honestly been really good, and let's just say virtual handshake over the screen now, just whatever that looks like. And yeah,
Salute.
I'd like to thank you both for all that, and thanks to all our viewers for listening in. This has been the AYOY podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.